Jacob and Esau. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. 20 years passed by and Isaac prayed to the Lord as his wife was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant. She felt a lot of movement in her womb and asked God, "Why is this happening to me?" The Lord replied, "Two separate nations are in your womb, one people will be stronger than the other, and the elder will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, she had twin boys. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was hairy, so they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. He was named Jacob. Esau as the firstborn would get the birthright that God had promised to Abraham. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter who loved to be in the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. One day Esau set out on a long hunting trip. Jacob remained at home and prepared lentil stew. Later that day, Esau came home from hunting tired and hungry. He smelled the delicious stew that Jacob was making and begged for some of it. Jacob wanted to be eldest, and have the right to the blessing that fathers gave to the firstborn in those days. "Sell me your birthright," Jacob said. "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Then swear to me that you will sell me your birthright." So Esau swore an oath to Jacob to give him his birthright. Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then got up and left. He did not care about God's promise to make a great nation from his descendants, one of whom would be the Savior of the world. Now Isaac was old, his eyes were so weak, and he could no longer see. Isaac called his oldest son Esau and said, "I am now an old man and close to death. Get your quiver and hunt some wild game for me. Prepare a meal just as I like it, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to Esau. When Esau had gone, she told Jacob to get 2 choice young goats, so that she could prepare some tasty food for Isaac. The plan was for Jacob to take it to his father so that he and not Esau would get his father's blessing before he died. "My brother Esau is a hairy man while I have smooth skin," Jacob protested. "What if my father touches me and finds out I am tricking him? I would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing." "Just do as I say," Rebekah said. She then covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goatskins. Jacob went to see Isaac with the tasty meal Rebekah had made. "Who is it?" Jacob asked. "I am Esau your firstborn," Jacob lied. "Come near so I can touch you and know you are my son Esau." Jacob did as Isaac asked. The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Jacob kissed his father, and when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him. He made him lord over his brother and all his relatives. Nations and people would bow down to him. Those who cursed him would be cursed and those who blessed him would be blessed. Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, when his brother Esau came in from hunting and prepared a meal. "Who is there?" Isaac asked. "It is your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled and said, "Then who was it that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." "Father, bless me too," Esau begged. "Your brother deceitfully took your blessing." "This is the second time he has taken advantage of me," Esau argued. "He took my birthright and now he's taken my blessing." "I have made Jacob lord over you," Isaac continued. "I have made all his relatives his servants. I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" "Do you have only one blessing?" Esau asked. "Father, give me a blessing." Isaac answered, "You will live by the sword and serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." Esau held a deep grudge against Jacob because of his deception. He plotted that once his father was dead and days of mourning were over, he would kill Jacob. "Your brother Esau is planning to kill you," Rebekah warned Jacob. "Flee at once to my brother Laban in Paddan Aram. Stay with him until your brother's fury subsides." So Jacob set off on the long journey north to Haran, where Laban and his family lived. On his travels he stopped for the night, because the sun had set. Taking a large stone, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He saw a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, and a vision of angels who were going up and down upon it. Above it stood the Lord, who spoke to Jacob, and gave to him the promise that he had first given to Abraham, and told him that he would go with him, and bring him again into his own land. The Lord said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out in every direction. Everyone on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." When Jacob woke he thought, "The Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early the next morning Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, which means, house of God. Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, protect me, provide food to eat, and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God." Jacob declared, "This stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you give me I will give you a tenth." Jacob continued on his journey to Haran. He was also hoping to find a wife. At Bethel, God had told him that he was with him and everyone would be blessed through him and his descendants. As Jacob came close to Haran he saw a well covered by a large stone and 3 flocks of sheep grazing nearby. Jacob asked the shepherds, "Where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. "Do you know Laban?" Jacob inquired. "Yes, and he is well. Here comes his daughter Rachel with his sheep." When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, he rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. He told Rachel who he was, then kissed her and wept aloud. She ran to tell her father and Laban invited Jacob to stay with them. A month later Laban said, "Just because you are a relative of mine, you should not work for me without pay. Tell me what your wages should be." Laban had 2 daughters, the elder was Leah, and the younger was Rachel. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. At the end of the 7 years Laban held a wedding feast. But Laban gave Leah and not Rachel to Jacob as his bride. It was not until the next morning that Jacob discovered he had married Leah and not Rachel. A furious Jacob confronted Laban. "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the elder one," Laban explained. "But I will allow you to marry Rachel in return for another 7 years' work." Jacob agreed. A week later, Rachel became his wife. Jacob worked another 7 years for Laban. When the Lord saw Leah was not loved by Jacob, he gave her 4 boys, Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah. Rachel remained childless. Eventually Jacob and Rachel had a son who was named Joseph. Jacob told Laban that he wanted to return to his homeland of Canaan. Laban knew Jacob had done a great job looking after his sheep and cattle and did not want to lose him. "Name your wages, and I will pay them," he said. Jacob replied, "I will stay and work for you if you let me go through your flocks and remove all the speckled or spotted sheep and goats, plus every dark-colored lamb. They will be my wages." Laban agreed to the arrangement. Jacob found that by peeling the bark of poplar, almond and plane trees and putting the peeled branches in front of the feeding troughs where the flocks drank, when they mated they bore young who were streaked, spotted or specked and therefore became his. He made separate flocks for himself and these became larger and stronger than those that belonged to Laban. In this way Jacob became very rich and had many servants. Laban's sons protested that Laban's flocks were not doing as well as Jacob's flocks. Jacob soon noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and I will be with you." Rachel and Leah agreed to go to Canaan with Jacob. They got on their camels and took their herds with them. But they did not tell Laban that they were leaving. Before they left, Rachel stole her father Laban's household gods. 3 days later Laban was told that Jacob had gone. He immediately set off in pursuit. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead. After 7 days Laban caught up with Jacob. But in a dream, God warned Laban not to say anything good or bad to Jacob. "Why did you run off and deceive me?" Laban asked. "You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren or let my daughters say goodbye. And why did you steal my gods?" Jacob replied that he had not said goodbye as he was afraid Laban would not let him go. Jacob did not know Rachel had stolen her father's gods and said, "If you find anyone who has stolen your gods they shall die." Laban began searching the tents and found nothing. Rachel had hidden the gods in her camel's saddle bag which was in her tent. She sat on the saddle bag refusing to get up as her father searched her tent. Laban did not find his gods. Jacob became angry. "Have you found the stolen gods? I have worked hard for you and treated you fairly. God has seen my hardship and in the dream you had he rebuked you." Laban replied, "All you see is mine but what can I do? Let's make an agreement between ourselves." The 2 men gathered stones and piled them into a heap. Then they ate together. Laban promised not to go past the heap of stones to hurt Jacob, and Jacob promised not to go past the heap to hurt Laban. They took an oath in the name of God and offered a sacrifice. The next morning, Laban kissed his daughters and grandchildren goodbye and then returned home. After Laban left, Jacob was in the hill country of Gilead at a place he named Mahanaim because angels of God had met him. His twin brother Esau was living in the land of Edom in the Seir Mountains. Jacob sent messengers to Esau to say, "Your servant Jacob has been staying with Laban. He has cattle, donkeys, sheep, goats, and servants. He begs to find favor in your eyes." The messengers returned to report, "Esau is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." Jacob became frightened. He divided those who were with him into two groups so that if Esau attacked one group the other group might escape. Jacob prayed, "Lord, you told me to go back to my country and my relatives, and you would make me prosper. I am unworthy of your kindness and faithfulness. Save me from Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack us. You have promised to make my descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted." Jacob chose a gift for Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. He put each herd in charge of a servant and set them off at intervals. When the servants met Esau, they reported who they were and who had sent them. "These are a gift sent to my lord Esau from Jacob, who is following behind us." That night Jacob sent his family and possessions over the ford of the river Jabbok. He remained alone. A man came and wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The stranger replied, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." The man replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed Jacob. Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." Jacob was limping because of his hip. He then looked and saw Esau and his 400 men coming toward him. Jacob put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. Then he went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they wept. The servants, wives, and children of Jacob were introduced. "These are the children God has graciously given your servant," Jacob told his brother. "What's the meaning of all these flocks and herds?" Esau asked. "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," Jacob replied. Esau did not want the gift, but Jacob insisted. Esau returned thinking that Jacob would follow on later to join him in Edom. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. From there he moved on to Shechem, where he set up an altar to God. God then told Jacob to go to Bethel, the place where God had promised to look after him. Jacob obeyed and built an altar to God. He then told his family to hand over all their foreign gods and the rings in their ears. Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. God told Jacob his new name would be Israel, and he would give this land to him and his descendants, who would become a nation. Jacob then traveled south. As they approached Ephrath, his wife Rachel began giving birth to a son. Rachel died giving birth, but the baby survived and was named Benjamin. Rachel was buried at Ephrath, and Jacob set up a pillar above her tomb. Jacob now had 12 sons. Jacob then traveled to Mamre, where his father Isaac was living. When Isaac died, both Jacob and Esau mourned and buried him. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share and leave a comment. Subscribe.